Hi, I'm Carlene, and this is Diva Tonight. The show has been sponsored by Raw Truth, Stories of Female Infidelity.
Ladies, have you been led astray? Did you diddle where maybe you shouldn't have dabbled? Have you been unfaithful to your husband, wife, partner, main squeeze? Well, there's a judgment-free podcast just for you. Raw Truth, Stories of Female Infidelity, hosted by Rebecca Adams, tells the stories of these women from their perspective, anonymously and without judgment.
I met the first man I had an emotional affair with online. He was far away, but he provided me with all of the emotional validation that my marriage was lacking. The first time we talked, he showed an interest in me as a person. It was refreshing.
If you need to come clean, get it off your chest, confess your sins with no Hail Marys required, then Raw Truth, Stories of Female Infidelity is the podcast for you. And remember, it's completely anonymous and judgment-free.
Raw Truth, Stories of Female Infidelity is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today.
Hi, I'm Carlene, and this is Diva Tonight. We have with us on Zoom, Deborah Ann Davis. How are you?
I'm so good, it's scary.
I like that saying. I'm going to take it from you. So how is it in Connecticut? You were telling me where you're supposed to get lots of rain.
Tomorrow's supposed to be all thunderstorms all day.
Yeah.
Starting early in the morning, which is kind of unusual to have thunderstorms in the morning, but.
Okay. And when it rains, is it heavy rain to the point where like you can't really run out and do something? Is it like all the way up to your ankle? Like I know in Texas, it's pretty bad when they get it.
No, we're not flooding right now. The amount of rain that we've been getting has been healthy for the ground, and we don't have anything backing up or anything like that yet.
Okay. So that's good. So your claim to fame, you've been a teacher for 27 years, you said, and you're also the author of How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door.
Yes.
Which is, I think, a very interesting title because it speaks to parents, right?
Yep. My daughter said to me, Mom, you can't write that book. I never slammed the door. So I said, well, why do you think that is?
Because you figured it out. You know what? I think that's an interesting thing. I guess we could talk about that on the show. The relationship you have with your parents. I think some of us have good relationships with our parents. Some of us don't. But you've obviously written this book based on your own experience as a parent and probably as a teacher as well, right? So
right. A lot of it has to do with my experience from teaching, because I would see parents when their kids had messed up. So in order for them to solve whatever problem the kid was having, whether it was behavioral or academic, I would have to be able to get them to talk to each other, because usually we'd be in a meeting where I had this angry parent and this sullen kid. So I had to get them to talk to each other. And all of those techniques are the things that you can do in your relationship that prevents that frustration where somebody's slamming the door. Because let's face it, when you're really upset, slamming the door feels good. It's like a self-soothing exercise. I mean, it self-soothes. It doesn't soothe anybody who's listening to it, but, you know.
Yeah. Well, slamming the door is one thing, but now, before it used to be this great thing where you could slam your phone. Like, remember back in the day, you could just, the home phone was just like, I don't want, I'm done.
Yep.
Just slam the phone. Now I have a cell phone. I really can't slam my cell phone the same way. It doesn't do the same trick, right? So
no, if you slam your cell phone, it won't be able to withstand all the times that you've dropped it. If you never dropped your cell phone, you could probably slam it one time. But because we all drop our cell phones, you cannot slam the cell phone. No.
Doesn't have the same effect, right? But I mean, when we're angry, we do things that we rethink and we're like, maybe I shouldn't have did that. And then we have to apologize for our actions. Or like you said, slamming the door is probably just needing that space away from that person just to decompress and think about this. It's like that teen angst. We're just like in their room all the time, right? So
that's exactly right. And besides that, once the door is slammed, they're on the other side of the door wondering if they've totally ruined the relationship. And it's scary for them, because if they've totally ruined the relationship, then they're going to have to raise themselves. So, I mean, I'm sure they're not thinking in terms of that, but that's what that dread is. So it makes it harder for them to open the door back up, just in case they're going to be rejected by their parent.
So if you could give me an example, I think the reason you created this book is obviously important, but let's start from the beginning. Like, what made you decide to become a teacher, first of all?
Well, my dad was a teacher. So when I left for college, I knew I was absolutely positively not going to be a teacher because that seemed to lack imagination. So I went through a series of majors, everything from psychology to math to archaeology. I mean, I was all over the place. And then I was taking a lot of science classes because I originally started doing it because I was trying to get science credit and I liked it. And I took another class by the same teacher. And so I ended up down a science path. And then in my junior year, I had the good fortune to be in a car collision with a drunk driver and broke both of my legs and lost the semester and lived in a hospital for a couple of months. And that completely changed my life, gave me clarity. I can't even connect the dots for you. All I know is that in that hospital, I decided I wanted to be a teacher. So I started teaching and I was born to it. They say that teachers are repressed actors. So you have this captive audience in front of you every day. And I found that I needed to teach high school. My best group is sophomores because they get my jokes. I don't have to explain them to them. Ninth graders, they about half of them get my jokes. Middle schoolers, I have to explain pretty much everything that my jokes are about. So then they laugh. So, but yeah, I have to be careful. I had to learn to be clear about what kinds of things I was joking about. One time when I was teaching, I was down in Atlanta and they had a bloodmobile there. And what they were doing was allowing the teachers to go donate blood by putting somebody in their classroom to keep order while you were going to be gone for a little bit. But I was a science teacher, so I had just set up a lab and I had all my equipment out. And the person they had covering my class, I didn't think had very good control over the kids. And so I was worried about the kids messing with my equipment. So I went into the bloodmobile and I donated my blood. And then you're supposed to have juice and cookies afterwards. But I was so anxious to get back to my classroom that I wanted to just get out of there. So I sat up really fast to see how I'd feel. And I felt okay. And I swung my legs down off the table and I felt okay. And then I stood up and I felt okay. And they're going, you should have some juice and cookies. I'm going, no, I feel great. And I rushed down the hallway to my classroom and somewhere, I guess I got there after class was out because I don't remember seeing the kids, but somewhere in the next few moments, I passed out in my classroom. So the next class was coming in. They found me on the floor. Some kids went running out to get help. They found a teacher in the hallway and they're calling, Miss Taylor, come quick. And they ripped the sleeve off her blouse. Tugging on it. And she comes into the room and she told me later that the kids were standing in a circle around me, poking me with their toes, going, get up. It's not funny. Get up. So the next day when I had them in class, they were so mad at me because I had scared the poor little things, And so I'm sitting there going, I'm really sorry. It's like, a whole class of 25 pubescent, angry kids with their hands crossed, sitting back going, if they tell you to drink cookies and have cookies and juice, then you should have the cookies and juice. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I will next time. But I know I tease you guys a lot, but I would never, ever tease you about something having to do with health. Never. So, but, it took them like 2 or 3 days to forgive me. It was so funny. It's like my daughter's cat, when it gets mad at her, it poops in her shoes. I was like, better not leave my shoes anywhere. These kids are mad.
Oh my gosh. They were so traumatized by that. Well, not really traumatized, but like that experience, they just wanted you to get up and they didn't understand that you obviously didn't have your cookies and juice, right?
I told them the next day. That's all it was. I'm not sick. It was just... Yeah, I didn't have my cookies and juice, and they're like, they say have cookies and juice, then you have the cookies and juice.
It was like your students were your parents at that point. That's what it sounded like. Your
Total role
parents are like,
reversal.
yes, exactly. That is so adorable for those moments like that. So obviously you've had many experiences as a teacher and you've written this book based on those experiences, but now is a little bit of a different time. And I think a lot of teenagers are probably just, I don't know how it's like for lockdown in Connecticut. Like if things are reopened, we are still like.
It kind of depends on the school and what they're doing. And many schools are saying, we're having class. It's your choice if you're going to come in. Okay. Some schools are saying you have to come in. And some schools are saying, we're so close to the end of the year, we're staying distant learning. So,
yeah. It's been a bit of adjustment as a parent yourself. Have you noticed, like you've written this book based on your own experiences, but what have you noticed about teenagers? I think, especially now during the pandemic.
This is the thing. The kids are scared. They watch the adults. They're getting their information from three things. One is if they listen to the news or follow it online. Two is that they watch the adults in the house watching the news. So they see when you're clutching your breasts or when you're going, they watch and listen to all that, and they know that something has upset you and they don't understand what it is and they don't ask you about it. So they draw their own conclusions. And then the third source of information for them is their peers, which is unreliable at best. So, because that's their interpretation of watching their parents and watching the news and trying to figure out what's going on. So basically it's the blind leading the blind, sharing stories and saying what's going on and what it all means. But really what the parents need to say to the kids is, I got this. You're going to be all right. It's going to be okay. And if it switches again, then I will make sure that you need whatever you need, I will help you get that. And if I don't know how to do that, I will find someone who does. So you don't have to worry. Everything is going to be okay. Our household is fighting this thing together as a team. We are staying masked. We're doing good practices and staying clean and not doing risky behaviors. So we are staying healthy and we're working at it. So we got this. We're good. Don't worry about it. All you got to do is be a kid and be growing. That's all you got to worry about.
Yeah. Well,
and you need to say that like every week because it has an expiration date. It doesn't last. They get a new piece of information and they need to hear, no, you're okay. I'm okay. Your parents are okay. Your teachers are okay.
Yeah. I think the thing with this is that it just feels like there's no end date. It's like, I think it would have been a lot easier if we knew that, okay, this is the beginning. And this is when we plan to reopen. Like some states are already reopened that I know of. I know New York is, and I have family there. And so they were like, yeah, we're reopened. People are going to baseball games and it's back to normal. But losing the time, I think another thing, like even the graduation is like a milestone in your life. And if you graduated last year, you didn't really have the same graduation.
One of the schools I used to teach at, what they did was they had graduation this year and they had last year's kids participate in this graduation too.
Oh,
they
that's
brought
great.
Them back and they did a double graduation, which I think is lovely.
Yeah. Because it's like those milestones, right? Like, the teenagers now, this is like leading up to where they go. And I see here, just based on your background and what you do, you help other moms, right? So have you been helping?
I'm a parenting coach.
Yeah. So you help moms. And how long have you been doing that?
For years. Technically, I was doing it while I was teaching. But they didn't call it parent coaching back then. They called it after school conferences.
Right? Like it's the parent teacher meeting that you have and you're like,
that's right. Now it has a name.
Right. So I guess the one thing I think that's important to ask you is what is one of the concerns that parents do have and how do you help them?
The biggest one is, how do I talk to my child when we're upset? The parent and the child, right? When we're upset, how do I talk to my child? So what I tell them is, decide on your approach and talk to them about it when things are calm. And So you do all these, the book has all these suggestions about how you can talk to your kid if you get a good relationship, and how you can talk to your kid if you don't have a good relationship, and how you can start engaging them. And what you want to do is talk to them about stuff when nothing is going on. So the example I like to give is that I was always talking to my daughter about boys and sex and things like that back when she was little. I mean, not little, but, right when she started middle school, I started bringing that stuff up. No, I know. I started it when the school started it, when they had the little birds and the bees talk at school. That's when I started it. So we would talk about stuff, and I would do it really casually. I'd sit next to her and we'd paint our toenails on the front stoop. So we're shoulder to shoulder, we're not looking at each other, and we'd be talking, and I'd be talking about boys and stuff like that. And I would just casually say, well, I hope when you leave high school that you make it out a virgin. And she goes, oh, I will, Mom. Every year we talked about, like, during the summer, and it was very casual and not embarrassing because it was so casual, right? But her sophomore year or her freshman year in high school, we were hanging out having this conversation, and the boys were starting to take notice of her because she was a basketball player. So the elite athletes who were seniors were paying attention to her, and we were hanging out and casually talking. And I said to her, well, I hope you get out of high school a virgin. And she goes, oh, so do I, Mom. So do I. I was like, okay, plan B. It's time for plan B. It's okay. I was ready for this. But having the conversation when things don't matter, make it easier to talk about it when they do.
Yeah. The fact that you made it so easy for her to talk about it, I think that's a really hard thing. Like, having that conversation, a lot of parents don't necessarily do that, depending on how they were brought up. And so some kids have to learn on their own, or they learn in school, like you said. So it's nice if you are the parent that is going to continue to have that conversation so that it doesn't become a thing, you know what I mean? Because if you don't teach them, they're going to learn in school, or they're going to learn on their own, right? And so, yeah, I guess you help parents even with that too, right? Because I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not as, it was easier for you to have that conversation maybe, but not every parent is comfortable.
Well, here's the thing. I was ready for her middle school and high school self. I had been working with that age group all my adult life. So I was ready for that. And I knew what she was going to encounter. Most parents don't remember what it was like to be in middle school or to be in high school and the things that they felt. They just remember, like you said, the milestones. But I was in this high school all the time, in the middle school all the time. So I knew what was coming. So I was doing a pregame, if you will. The thing is that if you've got like a sophomore and you want to start now, you can. You don't have to, even if you've never had the conversation, you could still have the conversations. But the thing is, you can't start it out of the blue. You'll freak your kid out. So what you do is you say something like, I just heard this great podcast and they were talking about this thing that was kind of interesting, and I thought I would try it. So you say it at a time where it's calm. And then you say, I'm going to try to have some conversations about things that I think you're going to run into in the future. So I just wanted to let you know so you don't freak out or you don't think that something's up and I'm trying to sneak it in sideways. But I'm just want you to know that I'm going to be trying some new stuff. So don't worry, I'll give you warning. And then you sail off. You don't have a big discussion about it. So they'll be looking to see what you're going to be doing differently. And then if you don't feel comfortable being direct, or you think that your personality types will clash if you're direct, then you go in the side door. You say, I just read this comic in the funnies that was about teenagers, and it made me think of this thing that happened when I was a kid, blah, 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 blah. How do you think your best friend would react to that kind of situation? So you don't ask them about them. You ask them about their best friend. What do you think your best friend would do in this case? Or you're sitting and you're watching a movie and you'd say, how do you think your best friend's mom would react to that situation in the movie? So you bring up these conversations. They're short and sweet. They're not really in depth and heavy. And it creates a platform for you to build on.
Right. I guess it's like the stepping stone.
Exactly.
So this book that you've created, obviously, that you've written, you've touched on a lot of things. And I guess it's to get the communication started.
I do have a workbook for teenagers that I'm working on now. I also need to work on a title for it. But I started it 10 years ago, maybe longer. Prior to that, I was a science teacher before I was ever writing or anything like that. And I had these two girls come into my classroom after school hiding out. And one of them had an abusive boyfriend, and they wanted to use my room as their locker because that's where he was catching them, at the lockers. So they told me that it wasn't one of my students, but they wouldn't tell me who it was because they knew I'd report it. And I told them they could use my room as long as they kept the drama away from my classroom. And they had to come see me one day a week, every week, to talk about relationships, because apparently one of the girls had been in these kinds of relationships since the 7th grade, an abusive relationship with different boys all the way through. And she wasn't even old enough to drive yet. So they came in, and I had to devise these ways for them to look at the situation where they wouldn't feel judged and they wouldn't feel uncomfortable, and they would be willing to explore it. So I created all these little games, if you will, that they did together, making lists and doing that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the school year, we pared down everything that they had gone through and created a list of like 10 things that they required in a guy in order for them to be happy. And their lists were not the same, right? So fast forward 5 years, and I'm in a convenience store, and someone yells, "Mrs. Davis!" And this girl comes rushing out and gives me this big hug. And she's all excited, and she pulls out her wallet and says, "Look." And she has the list, and it's laminated. And she's had it all these years. And she goes, "I've been single for almost 2 years. I mean, I still date. A girl's got to stay busy. But if I don't get serious with them if they don't have any of these characteristics." And then she calls over this other girl who was working at the store and says, "This is that teacher I was telling you about. Show her your list." And that girl had a list in her wallet, laminated, different list. And she didn't know me, but she said, kind of shy, "I've been single for 6 months." And, they were proud, because that's what the whole thing I was trying to teach them was that you didn't need to have somebody in order to be happy. And it was okay to be patient and picky. That was my phrase. Be patient and picky. Be patient and picky. Wait until you get what you want. And they were waiting, and they were happy. So they were the ones who told me I needed to write the book so I could help other kids. I'd already used it on my daughter, which, interestingly enough, she doesn't remember me doing this at all. At all. Anyway, I wasn't a writer back then. I was full-blown science teacher. So that's like, me write a book? No. So now I want to go back to that book. Now that I've done the book for the moms, I want to do the book for the daughters. But the book for the moms is about how they can bridge that gap. Because believe it or not, no matter how bad the relationship gets, turns out that by the time you're a middle-aged woman, you have a good relationship with your mother 80% of the time. No, I should say 80% of the women have a good relationship with their mother. I just don't think people want to wait that long for them to get along with their daughters, So I'm trying to give them some shortcuts so they can relate to each other better. They got so much in common already, and you just need to capitalize on that. They both want the relationship to work out. They both want to be understood and heard and respected. They both want unconditional love. And they both wish that everything would just magically get fixed and they could just get back to the relationship they used to have when they got along. So what better basis to have for building on something?
Yeah. Wow. Those are some strong words there. Good book for moms, of course, to help talk to their teenage daughters and to start the conversation, because not everything is perfect in life, right?
The book is basically about relationships.
Yeah.
So the things in here work for trying to bridge that gap between a strained relationship with a spouse or a significant other, or talking to your sons, or fathers talking to daughters. I mean, it's the same thing. It's all about figuring out how to talk to them in a way that they'll receive the information. That's what the book's about.
And that's important because this show is about relationships. And I think like the relationships that we have with our parents kind of like advocate the relationships we have with those in our lives and the important people. And like you said, being happy with being with yourself, the thing that you taught them, I think a lot of girls need to hear that. Even for myself, I think I was a serial dater, always had a boyfriend or whatever. And then you realize then when that one relationship that you really wanted to work didn't work, that it's time to take time for yourself and like figure out like what you want in your next relationship, if you have it, or, but I think it's, you're a great teacher when a student stops you at the grocery store. You've made your mark on them and they remembered what you said. And as a student, like we were just talking about how we love learning before we started. But I think even me as a student, you love learning when you remember what your teacher said to you like years ago. I remember one of my college professors starting a lecture on just the topic of radio. And it still sticks with me now because it was so powerful. And for those of us who love learning, right? And you love learning and you love teaching, and you obviously have this book and it's going to leave an impression on those who read it.
I'm a lifelong learner, and my goal always was to make my students want to learn. And I've produced a lifelong learner. I look at my daughter who's in her early 30s, and I'm like, yep, that girl's going to keep learning and learning and learning. I spent most of my life in school. You think about it, I started when I was 4, and I stopped teaching when I was 57. So I spent my entire life in the classroom, whether I was a student or on the other side of the table as a teacher. So now that I'm not teaching anymore, I still can't control the trying to eat in 20 minutes that you do for lunch. I still keep trying to get my meals down really fast in order to, beat the bell.
Yeah, it's still in your head because you've done it for so long, right? Creature of habit, right? You're like, you're not on the clock right now, but it's still there. So if there's one thing you want to say to a mom who's listening right now about her teenage daughter, or maybe even her teenage son, right? What would you say?
Don't be afraid to have the conversation. Even if you muff it up, they will hear you and they will know that you are trying. So they need to know that you love them and you're already doing better than you think you are. So if you're not sure if you're doing it right, ask them, what would be a better way for me to do this? When I finally figured that one out and said that to my daughter, she said to me, well, sometimes I need you to be my friend, and sometimes I need you to give me advice, and sometimes I need you to just be quiet and let me vent. So she calls me up and she goes, Mom, and I hear that voice, Mom, right? So I know there's something coming. So I say, okay, what's my role here? And she'll say, I don't know. I mean, I'm just venting. And then, maybe I'll ask you for some advice or whatever. So we don't bang heads anymore. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that because even though she says I'm just venting, I don't want you to give me any advice. I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. But she's good. She'll say, Mom, I told you I didn't want advice. And I'll go, You're right. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, vent. But the more transparent you are with the process, the easier it is for your kids to trust you that you'll have their back when it's time to talk about something important.
Definitely.
If you don't know what you're doing, say to them, I don't know what I'm doing. I used to say to my daughter, this is the first time I've been a parent of a 9-year-old. This is the first time I've been a parent of a 10-year-old. My husband said to me once, when are you going to stop saying that? I said, when she gets to middle school. I know what I'm doing in middle school.
Yeah, you were in middle school. You were teaching in middle. You said you started teaching them when they were in kindergarten, and then you did science in high school. So high school is where you thrive, obviously, because they get your jokes, right?
Yes. I only did middle school and high school. I never did the little kids. Oh. I bow down and I admire people who do elementary and pre-K and all that stuff. I don't know how you guys do it, but oh my gosh, thank you. Because I get the products in my room and they're ready, and I really appreciate the work you do because I could never ever do elementary school. Elementary school kids cry. They don't wipe their own noses and they hold on to your leg. And high school kids never hold on to your leg. And they'll wipe their nose if you hand them the tissue box, and they hardly ever cry. So I'm better off there.
They're like all on their way. You know what I mean? It's a class between like teaching high school versus teaching university, right? So that's very interesting. I like everything that you've said. And it's amazing that you've written this book and you have plans to write another book, which is great. But so for those that are interested in the book, where can they get it?
The book is called How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door. And you could basically get it everywhere. If it's not in the store, they can order it for you. But I will say that if I may, I have a free offer for your audience that I have another book called How to Get Your Happy On. And if they go to my website, they can get it right there. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon, but you can get it for free on my website, DeborahAnnDavis.com.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's great. How to Get Your Happy On. Tell me more about, obviously the title speaks for itself, but what is the motivation?
It is not an inspirational feel-good book. It is a book totally about how to physically increase your happiness levels in your body. It has to do with the hormones that your body's generating. You can physically generate the hormones and change your mood, even if you're not feeling it. For example, one of my favorite exercises that you can do, I call it the fake smile. So when you smile, your body uses all these muscles to do that, and it triggers all these nerve endings, which create your happy hormones. So the smile, it's like a little positive loop there, right? If you fake smile, it turns out that your body can't tell the difference. It generates all the happy hormones anyway. So if you're really mad, you can interrupt that spiral, that negative spiral, just by making a grin. And it creates a little spurt of happy hormones in your body. However, if you're going to do this, you got to tell your family ahead of time. Because if you're in the middle of a fight and you start grinning at them, you're going to scare them.
I think so. They'll be like, what the heck? What just happened there? What did you do?
Mommy's going off the deep end.
You went from angry to like grinning. How did that happen? Right? We're having a mood change, you know? Yeah. You know what? It's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of us now, like, you know, trying to find your happiness or trying to get back into the routine of things, because it's been
my book's about generating the happiness. You generate it. You actually physically create it in your body.
Yeah.
And then you can't, I mean, if you put those happy hormones into your body and your mind and your gut are all going to react the way they're supposed to.
Regardless of like how things are going, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got a lot of stress hormones going on in your body, you may need to do extra work to make the balance between the stress hormones and the happy hormones go towards the happy hormones. But it does work. It really does work. Here's a really good one. So if you are just sitting forward and you cast your eyes upward, just look upward like you're looking towards the sky, that releases happy hormones. Okay. And here's another one that does it. Doing a big, powerful exhalation.
Yeah.
Right? You get that feeling of relief in your stomach. Right? Okay. So put those together. Putting the eyes up and big sigh. What is that? That is a hissy fit, right? The teenagers rolling their eyes and exhaling like that, they are putting happy hormones into their body. They don't know that's what they're doing, but those are self-soothing movements. And when parents see it, they take it personally, like they're being insulted or whatever. But really, what you need to know is that your kid is regrouping and recalibrating and reorganizing, resetting themselves just by rolling their eyes and exhaling. Stomping the feet also does it, because stomping your feet on the ground grounds you. It makes you centered. It takes you out of all the stuff that's bothering you and makes you focus on your feet. So stomping your feet, rolling your eyes and going, all of that looks like it's being an insult, but that is the way your kids are making themselves feel better. When you've got an angry child who stares at you, they are trapped in their anger.
We all go through different emotions, but it's like you said, that one thing that you said, the stomping of your feet or the, you do that. Like, I think it's like, it's just a reaction. And then your parents think that you're being rude or you're being huffy and puffy, right? And so it's just a reaction. Going back to slamming the door, it's just like, it's probably not an attack on the parent, but it's like, you know what? I just need time away from you, right? But I'm glad that you wrote this book and wish you all the best with the new book. So I'm speaking to Deborah Ann Davis, who is a very lovely teacher by the sounds of it, because your students remember you, and pretty sure every now and then you run into one of them and they're like, Miss Davis. Right? So we can find you on your website, like you said, DeborahAnnDavis.com. And are you on Instagram too?
Instagram and Facebook. Oh, and I have a Facebook group called the Mom Meetup.
Oh, the Mom Meetup. I like that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and sharing your journey. It's been quite the journey that you've had, and it's been a very interesting one. And I wish you all the best for 2021. Thank you for being on Diva Tonight.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the privilege. Thank you.
Yeah.